Hi there, thank you so much for being here. I'm Heinz, the founder of Plentiful, and I'm thrilled to have you here. Let me ask you a question. Last time you went to the beach, or anytime you've gone to the beach, have you ever picked up a shell, looked at it, and said, that's one heck of a pretty shell? You most likely have. But what you may not have done is ask the shell what your hidden beliefs are, what her message is to you, where in life you are stuck and how to become unstuck. And you haven't done that because you haven't met Shelly Hanson. Shelly is the world's most renowned seashell expert, really a seashell whisperer, if you will. And I was fortunate enough to speak with Shelly earlier today about her knowledge, or at least some of her knowledge on seashells. We talked about the anatomy, the biology, the history of shells, and each one of the shells that exist in the world is completely unique, and as a result has a unique story to tell, not just about itself and its own life, but importantly about you and your life. I walked away enlightened and very intrigued, and I encourage you to grab a shovel to go diving with me and Shelly into the oceans and into the world of seashells. Shelly, I'm so happy you're here today. And I'm so happy, A, to have you, because we've known each other for a little while, but we've never really had an in-depth conversation about seashells.
Right.
This is a topic that I know very little about. So I'm thrilled to learn so much more about this, as I'm sure all the viewers are going to be as well. I want to start at the top, Shelly, and ask you, what exactly is Ocean Oracle?
Ocean Oracle is a method where you can use seashells almost like a psychological tool. They can probe into your hidden thoughts and feelings. And the reason that's important is you create from your beliefs. If you have hidden beliefs, they're still impacting your life behind the scenes. So the shells bring this to your awareness to empower you with options to maybe change any belief that's limiting you or no longer serving you. And that can reshape your future.
Tell us about your journey. Like, where did you have your aha moment where all of a sudden your life started becoming about seashells?
Okay, my life was about seashells all my life. Maybe because of my name. I never lived near the ocean, but my grandparents gave me my first shells when I was 4 years old. And I was just obsessed from that moment on. And by the time I was 8, my parents bought me the How and Why Wonder Book of Seashells because they saw my obsession. And that's set up in a question answer format. My reaction when I got that book was, I have to memorize this book. So I started a journal with all the questions and my memorized answers. But I didn't stop there. This is now yellow with age because I was 8 years old. But it's
Wow.
the questions and all my answers. But then anything became fair game. So I was cutting up anything that had to do with shells or mollusks. That's the animal that makes a shell. The clam mollusk makes a clam shell. Till it got out of hand because my aunt called me. She had a brand new shower curtain, pink plastic, but it had pictures of shells on it. She couldn't wait to show her little niece. I come over, and my first reaction is, can I cut up your curtain to put it in my journal?
Okay.
And my aunt let me. So in my journal, the pink things that you see here, that was her shower curtain.
My God.
That's
Okay.
how obsessed I was. I look at it now, I'm kind of mortified that I destroyed her curtain, but also so touched that my family was so supportive of this obsessed little kid. So, as I said, I don't have a reason for that obsession, but that's how far driven I was in learning about shells and the animals.
But do you remember like what specifically spoke to you?
And a psychic came over to our apartment one day for other reasons in the family, but he saw my shells and he said he heard of a shell reader. I didn't know there was such a thing. And I wanted to go, but he didn't know how to get me in touch with a shell reader. But he saw that he lit that fire in me and he said, you should use your own shells. And I said, thinking this is common knowledge, everyone will know this one is poisonous. This is the principle of the submarine. This is where the color purple comes from. And I'm going on and on. And he said, I didn't know any of that. And I honestly don't think anyone else will either. So when he left, the next day I'm sitting with my shells thinking, how could I use you for readings? That means you each have to have a message. And I had 200 or so shells at the time. Because I studied them all my life, I knew what every single one of them meant within a week. Because I was looking for what's unique about the animal that makes this shell, its behavior, its anatomy. So to give you an example of the diversity, this is called a tusk. Someone who first found it thought it looked like an elephant tusk,
Very,
perhaps.
very appropriately named, I would say.
Yes. And all of
Yes.
my books said this animal had no heart. I'm thinking, how can an animal live without a heart? but that's a mollusk with no heart. Then you get somebody like the octopus, who's also a mollusk. It has 3 separate single-chambered hearts. And then you get the clam, the quahog clam. It has a 3-chambered heart and a pacemaker. We have a 4-chambered heart. Scientists can study the effects of drugs, nicotine on their hearts and extrapolate how it might impact us because our hearts are that similar. So look at the diversity. No heart, 3 single-chambered hearts, a 3-chambered heart with a pacemaker. Ever you look at how they feed, how they interact with people, their location, their protection methods, anything you look at, there's that much diversity. And that's why I could find something unique about each. You'd think they all must have the same blood, and they mostly, 99.9%, have blue, copper-based blood. But I have a shell that has red iron-carrying hemoglobin because oxygen transports better with iron, and they live in oxygen-poor environments. If someone is drawn to that shell, the animal doesn't want to waste whatever little bit of oxygen is available. The person doesn't want to waste time, money, energy. So it's all about being efficient. So you can translate the mollusk behavior to the human. And that's what I was doing. So my aha moment was all these shells had messages, but I was too shy to tell anyone. And this person, the psychic, came back a month later and asked me if I'd done any readings. And I said, I can tell you what they all mean, but I'm not going to go up to anyone and tell them there's a language. They'll think I'm crazy. He asked if he could have a reading. And I thought, I might as well see if there's anything to this. So he selected only 2 shells out of over 200. But he picked, this is called the Episcopal mitre, because someone thought it looked like the mitres that the clergy wear.
Okay.
So this meant religion to me, because the Episcopal, the name, the Episcopal mitre. And he picked this little shell, which was from my Irish babysitter, and looked like a spinning wheel to me. So if you combine religion and spinning your wheels means like you're stuck. You're stuck in a rut and you're spinning your wheels. I said to him, I don't know why, but if you were focused on religion, you might find yourself stuck in a rut, like you're spinning your wheels, thinking, this makes no sense. This will end as fast as it started. And he looks at me and he said, so you're telling me if I were to focus on religion, I'd make no progress and get stuck? I said, that's what that would mean. He said, I'm an ex-seminary student. I was going to be a priest. I had to leave the seminary because something didn't resonate. He had that spiritual calling, but it turned out it went into the direction of him becoming a psychic. So I'm trying to process what he's saying, and I'm got shocked look on my face, like, huh? And then he says, so this doesn't work, huh? Like teasing me.
Yeah, of course. Being ironic, right?
Yeah. And that was 40 years ago or so, and I've been doing it ever since.
And so he picked those 2 shells out of the collection of 200 shells. Wow, that's remarkable.
And so that was my aha, like, oh my God, it worked. Like I didn't expect it to work. But to be someone's soul's crisis, like at that level of working, I never stopped after that.
Yeah, the fact that he picked those 2, because I'm just trying to imagine myself. If I had a collection of 200 in front of me, I don't know. I don't even know where I would start, because like it's not like that seems natural, but 200 and then picking 2 out of 200. Did he hesitate and think about it, and then 5 minutes later he picked those 2, or did he immediately pick those 2?
He immediately picked those 2, but what happens is the way the shells work is energetically, you only see what you need to see. So it's not like I right now work with 500 shells, but a person will come and they'll look in my cabinet and they'll only see the shells they need for their message. The way I know this for sure is I had a brand new shell that I put in the cabinet of 500, and the person who came for a reading that day picked that shell, and it was crucial for their reading. And I realized they couldn't have come before then. I wouldn't have had the shell that they needed.
I'm assuming that if I came to see you, I would not be picking the same shell or the same 2 shells every single time, because there's different aspects to my life. Like today, I'm not, I have different challenges today. I have different opportunities today. I have a different life today than I did 10 years ago, right? And so as life progresses, you're probably drawn to different shells, right? Depending on where you are in your life. Is that fair?
Because also, as information is revealed in the shell reading, you may change something so that when you come back, you're now creating from a different place.
Right. And so it was that day that you decided you wanted to start doing readings for people.
Yes, and the irony for me is maybe because my name is Shelly,
Mhm. Mhm.
I was an extremely shy person. So when people would come to me, I would be happy to talk to them about the shells. I could do that all the time. So literally the shells brought me out of my shell.
Right, right. Yeah.
I wouldn't
That's
have been able to do an interview with you. I was so shy. But if I'm talking about my seashell partners, it's no problem. I'm eager for people to know about them.
and I can sense that. I could sense that from the very moment that we met. I was like, oh my, coming to life when she talks about Charles. She's coming to life. Okay. So give us this more detailed sense of what a reading is actually like. If I were to be your client, what would be my experience with you?
Okay, so I would like to use a higher self reading because rather than you coming with an intention of, I have this question, the higher self sort of knows what's for your highest good. And it may not be what you think it is. So if we can at least get that first, then if you have questions after that, I would go ahead and cover the other questions. But usually that applies to whatever the question might be that the client has.
Hmm.
So to do a higher self reading, I have the client close their eyes and just say their name, the name on their birth certificate, just a few times to themselves. And then when they open their eyes, see what jumps out, what gets their attention. And that could be, oh, wow, that's beautiful. That's such a pretty shell. Could also be, ooh, that bothers me. If it gets their attention, it counts. So I have them take out whatever number of shells it may be. There's no set spread. Once they have their shells, I ask them to arrange them any way they like. And then we string together the meanings based on the pattern that they've made in their arrangement and their reaction. I like it or I don't like it. And that's what delivers the message.
And you're saying that's not them really choosing, that's them being guided to choose those.
Yes, a shell is the partnership. Again, talking about the higher self, my higher self, their higher self, and the shell's higher selves work together in partnership for their highest good.
And so when they pick the shell, you give them a sheet, right?
Two, and they're on my website as well. Their availability would be to anybody who doesn't have Ocean Oracle. That's not going to limit them from having a reading. That's my main point. So you
Right.
can use those. They're numbered 1 to 200, so you don't have to know the names of them or try and tell me which one you're interested in. Just give me the number under the shell.
Is there anybody else in the world that knows as much about shells as you do?
Scientifically, yes, but they don't use them metaphysically.
Okay.
So I looked. Believe me, I told you I was a very shy person. Once I knew the shells could be used this way, I was seeking a teacher.
Hmm.
I thought there's got to be someone out there who can tell me how to do this. And every time I thought I found a teacher, it would turn out, for instance, I lived in New England. I was in Florida and I met this person who invited me to her house to do shell readings. She brought some friends. The friend came in and said she was so excited that she was going to come for this seminar on shells. She called a friend in Vermont and said, I've got somebody that I'm coming to tomorrow and she's going to teach us how to use shells for readings. The woman in Vermont said, we have someone here who does that. And her name is Shelly. So I said to this woman, can you please get the rest of that information? Because when I get back to Massachusetts, I want to go study with that woman in Vermont. And she said, sure. So before I started, she said, do you mind if I grab my mother? She'd like to come to this too. So she left for just a few minutes, came back with her mother. She said, Shelly, isn't your last name Hanson? And I said, yes. And she said, well, I called my friend in Vermont to get the information for you. And the woman's name is Shelly Hanson. It
Okay.
turned out I was writing a column in a metaphysical magazine. The
Right.
woman in Vermont had that. So here I thought I was found my teacher, and it was me.
Right. 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 So, in other words, there's nobody in the world that you have met thus far with whom you can have a conversation at your level.
Well, I discovered now recently there are people that are starting to write about using shells to do readings. I don't know what method that they're using. They may just be strictly intuition. I was a scientist, so I was comfortable with using the behaviors of the animals and their interactions with humans. They may have a different technique. There's also a place in Africa where they did seashell readings. And this might be what the original psychic had heard about, where it's more like tea leaves because they use one type of shell in bundles and they toss them. And it's the pattern that they make. They're called cowrie shells. It's the pattern that they make, how they land and what's next to what that they read. So it isn't the same technique that I did, but I didn't have anyone to tell me how to do it. So that's how I ended up doing it.
Right, right.
So as far as I know, yes, I'm the only one who does that, except for my students. They now do that too.
That's fascinating. The fact that you are the Einstein of shells. You're like the OG of shell readings.
And except the one thing I will say is when I was looking for a teacher and I couldn't find a teacher, I finally realized the shells were my teachers because they were guiding me. Like, look this up. Or, my God, the master teachings that I have from the shells. I just wish everybody knew about them, but they're not my master teachings. I say I'm the shell with the voice, and it's my honor to be an ambassador on behalf of my seashell partners to share their wisdom.
Has your interpretation of certain shells like evolved or even changed entirely? Like where you looked at a shelf like 20 years ago and you look at that same shell today, and the meaning that you thought it had 20 years ago is completely different from what it has today.
Not completely different, but it evolves deeper. The whole reason I wrote Ocean Wisdom is because after I wrote Ocean Oracle and I was writing that column for the Metaphysical magazine, about 30 shells from Ocean Oracle, where you'll only find maybe a paragraph for each, just started giving me so much more information that it was now a page of information on each. That's where the master teachings came in. I mean, they teach about topics you wouldn't associate a snail necessarily with love. They have so much to say about love and pride and survival and compassion and all these various things. I know people now are aware of the octopus. When I was a kid, oh my gosh, the octopus was the villain, was Ursula the octopus in Little
Right.
Mermaid.
From
They were
Disney.
something to be feared. Now you've got My Octopus Teacher, a Netflix documentary. You've got Remarkably Bright Creatures, where Shelby Van Pelt has the narrator of her story is Marcellus the octopus. So they're being appreciated for their intelligence. And I've lived long enough to see that because it used to horrify me as a kid that they had such an undeserved reputation. I knew how intelligent they were. But now all I want to do is make people aware the octopus is a mollusk. It's a relative of the clams and the snails, and to share how intelligent they are and the wisdom that they have to offer us can really just topple your world with the way that they look at life.
If you could double click into the biology of a shell, that would be really interesting because I feel most human beings experience with shells or encounter with shells is when they walk on a beach or they swim in the ocean and then they stumble upon or look for shells. And for the most part, these shells are empty shells.
So, couple of things. Every shell you ever see was made by an animal, but the animal is born with a shell that fits it perfectly, and then its body grows. So that eventually that shell is going to be useless. In fact, when I was teaching kids, I likened it to a shell, likened it to a shirt. So you've got a shirt when you're very young, it fits you perfectly, and then your body grows. So you've got this perfectly fitting shirt, and all of a sudden it's like the Hulk. It's
Yep.
useless.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Okay. So that's what happens to the mollusks, but also to crustaceans, crabs, lobsters, shrimp, same thing. But they handle it in two very different ways. When that shell is getting too confining, the crabs and the lobsters and the shrimp, just like a snake sheds its shell, you got a perfect shirt, gets too tight, you get another one, gets too tight, you get another one. That's the way the crabs and the lobsters, the crustaceans work. The mollusks, same perfect shirt, and body is growing, and all of a sudden that shirt is no good anymore. They just add more material over and over and over again, but they have the original one they started with. That's the major difference between the mollusks and the crustaceans.
When you say more material, I mean, but adding more material doesn't make something bigger, right?
Yeah. So, for instance, if you're looking at, so let me grab this triton. So, when it's born, the animal would only be like maybe this part of the shell, just the top.
Okay.
Then its body grows, it builds another whorl.
Oh,
Then
right.
its body grows and it builds another. So this bottom whorl is called the body whorl. That's where the animal would be living.
Okay.
But it has all the others throughout its life. It's still attached.
Okay. Okay.
So the animal is now only living down here in the body whorl. Now,
And I'd like to understand, like, what does the animal without the shell actually look like? Is it just like a squid,
okay.
like a squid or spongy?
Oh, it's like a sack of organs.
Okay.
It has no internal skeleton.
Okay.
So the shell is that external source of structure and support. So that sac, mollusk actually comes from the word for soft. Aristotle, I think, coined it.
Okay.
And that's what they are. They're this soft, fragile sac. So the shell is going to give them that structure and support. And then as the sac grows, as the bodies grow, they need to extend the size of their shell until they're adult size. Then they stop growing.
And then, okay, all right. 2 questions. One, the sac color is the sac. Is it gray? Like, or does it depend? Are they all different, or is it transparent? Like, what do they actually look
Well,
like?
that's a great question. I don't know what all of them look like, but there's color. Let me show you. Well, do you know what nudibranchs are? Sometimes they're called sea slugs.
Okay, no, I've heard of it, but I don't know. I can't envision it.
This will show you the kinds of colors they can be. These are sea slugs. That means they're mollusks, but they don't have shells.
Okay.
You can see the brilliant colors.
Wow. Okay.
So
Okay.
these are sea slugs. Now, these are mollusks with shells, and I want you to see because, okay, so the butterfly moon snail, let's see if I can hold this. This is the shell. This is the animal's foot sticking out of the shell.
Wow.
Okay, so this is a bubble shell, and you can see the pink frilly.
Mm-hmm.
That's the animal
Okay.
that lives inside that one. And then the next one is Lyria, and it's so funny. The animal's completely different pattern from the shell. And then the last one, the volute, the animal is like almost like looking sort of like a zebra, and the
Yes.
shell almost has no pattern at all.
And the part that looks like a zebra, is that soft or is that hard as well?
No. That's very soft, and that's the foot. Let's see if I can show you with this hand. This is its breathing tube,
Okay.
and these little parts here, those are the eye stalks. So that's where the animal's head would be.
Okay.
And then this is its foot.
And so what do mollusks eat?
Whole variety. Some are vegetarians, some are carnivores, some are cannibals. They'll eat each other.
Okay.
If you ever see, sometimes there's holes, little holes in shells, something like a moon snail. Where'd I put you? Moon snails, they're carnivores.
Okay.
And then something like a chitin, which I have a picture of here. They have 8 separate shells, and they kind of look like an armadillo. So let me show you the chitins. So see the 8 separate shells?
Yeah. Okay.
They live on rocks, and by having 8 separate shells, they have enough flexibility they can conform to whatever the contour of the rock might be. And they can curl up into a ball like an armadillo.
Right. Right. Okay. Wow, that's fascinating. And so, so to what extent do you study or have you studied like the biology, the lifestyle, whether or not they're carnivores or they're not? Like, to what extent does that influence your interpretation of what that animal represents?
Very much so, because when I was looking for what's a meaning attached to each, I was looking for what's unique. Well, if
Okay.
you're the only one with red blood, then you're valuing the efficiency of being able to utilize the oxygen. That's your message. You're about efficiency. If someone is drawn to that shell, it's telling me efficiency is important. And then you look at the other shells and you see the motivation for this is because they think it's more efficient. For instance, I have a shell that means I feel like I'm better off alone.
Okay.
And I can show you the pictures. I didn't bring the shell in, but let me show you the picture. It's called a carrier shell. And okay, so carrier shells are called that because they add other shells to their surface. I told you these guys are intelligent. If you look at that carrier shell, all the little shells it adds are facing up. Now, if it were randomly adding those shells, some should be facing down. The fact that they're all facing up shows that it's thinking about what it's doing. Ignore the glass sponge because that came over on its own. But the reason it's adding the shells to its surface, here's one called the geologist. Where are you? Where my finger is. This one, it adds rocks to the surface. I have a picture of one that added, it's whatever's in its environment, so it added a bottle cap, but it was facing up. The reason is they live on mud, and adding shells, adding rocks, it's spreading out their center of gravity like a snowshoe effect, so they don't sink in the mud. So with that said, here is a carrier shell. It's called the sunburst carrier. And there's no rocks, there's no shells, there's nothing because it grows its shell, spreading out its center of gravity. And what it said in my book is, at no time in its life does it form attachments. To me, that meant it prefers to be alone.
Right.
So
Of
if
course.
someone is drawn to that shell, then that's telling you, at least subconsciously, this is not always at a conscious level of awareness. They're thinking, I'm better off alone because in relationships, I'm either abandoned or betrayed or I have to compromise in some way. So they prefer to be alone. Now, consciously, they may not be aware they're thinking this. So they pursue relationships, but their subconscious ends up having that relationship fall apart. And even though they're grieving, like, oh my gosh, I'm so sad that this fell apart, the part of them that felt you're going to end up abandoned or betrayed or have to compromise is celebrating, because it would hurt so much more if they got invested in a relationship and then it fell apart. So they try to nip it in the bud early. And the person isn't aware they're doing that until that's brought to their awareness. And then they can say, do I really believe I'm better off alone? Now, in the reading, if they had the shell for efficiency with that one, that tells you part of the reasoning of why they think they're better off alone is it's more efficient. So that means you've got someone thinking, I don't have to think about what somebody else might want to do or what somebody else might prefer. I can do what I want when I want. That's more efficient.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, now I get it. It took me a little while. So you look at each one of
To
the
get it.
shells and you're like, okay, what makes this shell unique? How is this shell different from any other shell? And then you say, okay, this is what makes it unique and distinct. And as a result of that, when somebody picks that, and again, they pick it because they're guided by
They think it's pretty. Yeah. But their
something.
higher self is making them feel, I need that for the message. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you say, all right, therefore, this is what it means. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And especially then when they pick two, then it gives like not just like one part of the story there, but then it gives a fuller story. Or if they pick five. So with every shell they pick, the picture becomes clearer.
Yes. And I love that you mentioned that, because sometimes they can only process just so much. And then once that's processed, we can go back and grow what I call grow the reading and find out more. It can be that I'm saying, okay, based on your reaction to this shell, it means this. And then combined with this, it means that. But then sometimes I will have questions. And when I ask them a question based on their response, that can lead us into a deeper path. So again, it's a partnership.
Okay, I see. Outside of your readings, also have courses you're selling, specific seashell, divination, and energy healing courses. And on Plentiful, you offer two different ones. Can you tell us the difference between number one and number two?
Okay. Number two requires that you go through number one.
Mhm.
But number one teaches the language of the shells. So learning all about 200 shells that are in Ocean Oracle. So you're learning where the meanings come from. You're learning the behaviors of the animals. You're learning their interactions with humans throughout history. And then you also learn about how they can be used as energy tools, how they connect to the chakras. After that, the final component of the course is doing readings. Level 2 is applying everything that you know to take the readings to another level. And that's only 8 classes, but they're very interactive.
So at the end of course two, whoever is taking that course should be in a position where they can do readings on other people.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's the idea, that they graduate from level 1, they can do readings at that level too. But if they take the next, then we take it into a deeper, you keep probing deeper and deeper, as long as people are open to it.
Do you have a favorite technique or ritual within your courses that you love teaching because it's just so magical?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So there's a couple of things. The word magic, literally someone told me I should have get a t-shirt with this. Mucus is magical if you are a mollusk.
Okay.
So what does that mean? If you ever see a land snail, they have like a slimy trail with them. That slimy trail is mucus. So there's a picture of a land snail with a slimy trail.
It's
And
hard to
that's
see
just
because
to
it's white.
lubricate its path.
Okay. It's a little hard to see. Can you show it again? Because maybe.
Sure. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I can see it better now.
Can you
Okay.
see it now? I don't
I
know
can
whether
see
to
it.
go back a little, maybe.
No. I can see it. It's good.
Okay. So if you are familiar with the idea of the slimy trail, which I'm calling mucus,
Yep.
depending on which snail we're looking at, they have magical ways of using that mucus. So what I want to show you is the series of pictures of a snail climbing over an upended knife blade. So here he is approaching the knife. You can see the head sticking up over the knife.
Okay. Yeah. It's
He's
a bit.
getting a little further,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
over, up and over.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? It means this animal, if we were to be approaching obstacles like a knife blade in our lives, we would want to go around, we would want to back up. This is up and over because it perceives no harm. It perceives no danger. and it receives no harm. So if it perceives no danger, it's not thinking anything about going up and over. This is like somebody who can lay down on a bed of nails and gets up and not even a single puncture. If I were to do that, I would be bleeding profusely, I'm sure.
Right.
We have the same physical body. So what's the difference? The difference is our thoughts. The one laying down on a bed of nails perceives no danger and receives no harm. I'm looking at that like that's torture, and I end up bleeding. So the only difference is what's in our thought process. So that is one way that they are talking about mucus, but ways of using it. So let me show you this little guy. Can you see this shell? It's
Yep, I can
purple.
see it. Yep.
And it's lighter purple on top and darker purple on the bottom. Okay. In children's books, it's called the purple sailor.
Okay.
The reason is they live on the surface of the ocean, upside down, kind of like this, far from shore, and they can't swim. So how can they stay on the surface of the ocean if they can't swim? They build a raft. They use mucus like glue, and they glue air bubbles together. And here you see one on its air bubble raft. They attach underneath.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now, if it became separated from that raft, it would drown.
Right.
So its survival depends on clinging to the bubbles, which to me is like living in a fantasy. I'm in my little bubble. And they're blind. So it's like I'm in my little bubble and I don't want to see anything else.
Right.
So if I'm doing a reading and someone is drawn to that shell, at some level, they're in denial about something. They're clinging to that little fantasy. That's what that would tell you.
Okay.
Now, this shell for the use of mucus, this is called a harp. And I want to tell you about this because, again, about the intelligence. So let me show you the animal. I hope you can see.
I can see it. Yep.
Okay. Do you see how much this is all its foot, all that tissue here, all that meat? Here's the eyes on this end.
Now, when you say, Shelly, when you say foot, you keep saying foot. When I think foot, I look at my foot and I'm like, my foot is a small part of me.
What?
And here you're pointing at something and you're calling it foot, but it's the entire thing.
So every mollusk has a foot. I've only found two things that all mollusks share. One is they all have a mantle. The mantle is the part of their body around that sac I was talking about that makes the shell.
Yep.
And even the octopus used to have a shell. The octopus still has a mantle.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing they all have in common is a singular foot. And the foot is like that bottom piece. When you see them crawling around, people think they're crawling on their stomach. That's not their stomach. Their stomach is up in the shell.
Right.
The thing that they're crawling around on, that's their foot.
That's why you're calling it their foot. Okay.
Yes.
So, okay. So unlike us, they have one. They don't have two.
They have 1 foot.
One
So
foot.
even somebody like a clam, let me show you, because that's a great question. Okay. It's called mollusk foot. But if you can see the top shell there
Yeah.
with that piece sticking out, that's their foot.
Okay.
This is a cockle. And that foot is such a powerful muscle, they can jump. So they're jumpers.
Okay.
The chitin, the one with the 8 plates, if you roll it over, that's its foot. The tusk, the one that had no heart, there he is.
Yep.
That little piece at the bottom, that's its foot.
Well,
and that is the...
So it walks on that.
Sorry, what?
Walks on that. It walks on that little thing.
Yeah, you wouldn't really call it walking, but he kind of uses it to pull himself under the ground. They live under the ground.
Okay.
That's the one that had no heart.
Right. Yep.
And so that foot that it has, it's the contraction of its foot muscle that circulates the blood.
Okay.
So that foot is very important for the tusk. So yes, so they all have a foot, but it's that piece that I was telling you about. So with the harp, when you're looking at that picture and you see all that meat, imagine you're a crab coming after the harp and you're seeing all this food. You're thinking like dinner for a week. So the crab is coming after the harp. The harp has the ability to detach a little bit of its foot, like a salamander can drop its tail.
Okay.
So the harp detaches a little bit of its foot. Now that's going to preoccupy the crab.
Okay.
The harp
is going to eat
could
that?
get away.
The crab is going to eat that?
The crab is going to eat that portion of foot.
Mm-hmm.
And now the harp is free to get away.
Right.
But I said the magic of mucus. Instead, what the harp will do is secrete that slimy mucus, mix it with sand, and coat the crab. And the crab doesn't notice because the crab is munching on that little bit of foot. But all of a sudden, that sticky sand makes it so the crab can't move. And then the harp eats the crab.
Oh my God.
It completely turns the tables.
Okay.
Think of
Wow.
the intelligence and strategy, right?
That's an unexpected twist to that story.
Yeah. And so that's all about if someone is drawn to that shell, it's like the intended victim can be the victor, but it will take a little bit of a sacrifice. And then you look at the other shells, and that gives you the details on the sacrifice, like what's involved here to help you lead to victory.
That was a violent twist I didn't expect. Can you, and I'm sure you have tons that would come to mind, but I'm interested in just one heartwarming reaction client has shared with you after a session or a course.
Okay, snippets of reactions. I had a little boy I was teaching in the 3rd grade. I was brought in to teach, and the teacher was amazed because I came in after lunch, and the next thing she comes over and she said, "I'm really sorry I have to interrupt you, but the buses are leaving the parking lot." I'd been talking for hours. She said, "They never pay attention to anything that long."
Okay.
And so we had to stop because they had to go home.
Oh my
And a
God.
little boy came over and he said, "I used to think shells were boring." And that meant so much to me
Oh,
that he had
yeah.
shifted that.
Yeah.
And then I had a student who said to me after taking the class, "I think I met myself for the first time in this class."
Wow. That's
So
lovely.
yeah, I mean, that's the kind of heartfelt I will never forget when people say something like that.
No, no, no. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. What would you say is the key? And again, it's probably a range of things that you do through your readings and through your courses for people. But is it that you help them become unstuck? Do you help them become like aware of like a situation that they may not be realizing? Like, what is kind of like the benefit, so to speak, that you deliver via your readings to clients?
In one word, it would be empowerment, but I have seen so many different paths that ended up leading to empowerment for clients. And early on, when I was still in the doubtful stages of does this work, it was around the first time strangers were coming because I told you I was a shy person. When I was writing that column, I got invited on a radio show. And to show you how naive I was about the radio show, I was talking about cones, which are poisonous, and how deadly they are. There's one. It's called the cigarette snail because you just have time to smoke a cigarette before you die. There's no antivenom.
Wow. Okay.
And it's called the geography cone. But I was talking about this, and the host said, "What do they look like?" And I started showing her pictures. And the radio engineer fell off the chair laughing because he said, "You can't show pictures on the radio." But I wasn't thinking that. I was just so eager to show people. I was holding it up to the microphone, like, this is what they look like. With that said, when you're saying, like, what is the transformations that I've seen? There was a woman, and she had early on picked these shells that were telling such a tale of abuse. It was really horrific. And I was interpreting it this way. She wasn't reacting like it was making any sense to her. So she said, "Not much." And I thought, I must be getting this wrong. So I asked her to look back and pick out some other shells. Well, then she picks out the shell for "your rights are violated." I mean, it just got worse and worse. And she said, "Well, I do have a boyfriend who wants me to hug him more." And that's not what I was seeing. So I was just about ready to give up. And I was going to apologize when she burst into tears. And she said, "Over here, this is my father who abused me and my sister. And over here, this is my husband who held a gun to my head."
Oh my God.
And she said, "But nobody knows this." And she came with some other people in the other room. She said, "They don't know. Nobody knows this. How do the shells know?" I said, "They know because you know. This is you having a conversation with what's in your subconscious." And then I started asking her questions, and she couldn't talk anymore. And I wanted to spare her the pain. But she started pointing to shells, just pointing. And in that conversation, what came out was she pointed to the shell for forgiveness. Now, I have a couple of shells regarding forgiveness. She pointed to self-forgiveness. That's the last thing I expected. And it turned out she blamed herself for what they had perpetrated because, as she was pointing to the shells, if it wasn't her fault, she would have been a victim. And rather than consider herself a victim, she had convinced herself she caused them to do this. That was preferable to thinking of herself as a victim. But when all that came out, she started to realize it wasn't her fault. And she left willing to go to a therapist. And I was on cloud 9 because I thought, wow, they really helped her in that reading.
Mhm.
She had been carrying that for so long, not telling anyone and blaming herself all this time.
Mhm.
And I know that changed things for her. That was one of those moments where it's just like motivates you to want to work with everybody.
Wow. Shelly, let me ask you this. Maybe you look at your shells as almost like your kids, and so therefore you can't pick a favorite
Boy, that's true.
because doing so would be kind of unfair to the other 199 or 199. But are there certain shells you've had a more of an affinity for, like over the years?
Wouldn't say that because, like you said, it's like your kids. I couldn't pick a favorite. As a kid, I had a soul relationship with the octopus. And so, as I said, now I'm so happy that I lived long enough that now they're respected for their intelligence. But there are periods where certain ones rise to the occasion and they seem to be showing up in people's readings more frequently. And then another one will do that, and then another one. Right now, there's one that I would really like to talk about because I think the world needs this, and that's the moon snail. Because moon snails inflate their bodies, they absorb water. That foot that I was talking about, they end up looking like Jabba the Hutt. It's just all this blubber, and they can't get back in their shell till they expel the water. But this is, I told you that shells will teach about love. One of the love lessons is think of love as a wheel with all these spokes, and everyone perceives love from a different avenue. Moon snails are people that feel love through attention. Pay attention. But often what we do is we get the attention by disasters, by physical illness. We have an expression, misery loves company. We don't say joy loves company. We don't say love loves company. We say misery loves company. So what happens is the moon snail person will blow things up out of proportion, make mountains out of molehills, because they need that mountain to get the attention. If everyone breaks an arm, they'd have to break both legs. And you'll know you have a moon snail person if you ever have anyone say, if you think that's bad, wait till you hear what happened to me.
Okay.
That's a moon snail statement,
Okay.
because whatever it is going to have to be worse than whatever came before.
Okay.
So I was teaching about moon snail, and we took a break, and one of the students came over, picked up my moon snail, and said, it's all your fault, blaming the moon snail for whatever the misery was, right? I heard the moon snail, and it said, don't shoot the messenger. I don't judge what you use for attention. It doesn't have to be harmful. It can be everyone gets a 90 on a test, get a 95. So that I'm calling growing the light. And the way I want people to think about this is I literally had a friend tell me I would not spend time on the phone with her unless she was wounded. I was horrified, but she was right because there's only so many hours in the day. I would prioritize who I spent time with based on who was hurting. And if she was doing okay and everything was fine in her life, it was a quick little phone call. Well, I don't want to encourage my friends to wound themselves just so, we'd be talking on the phone.
Yeah.
So I started an experiment. And instead of paying attention to the disasters, to the illnesses, to the negative things, the misery loves company, I started saying to people, wow, you should hear what happened to so-and-so, this awesome thing. And to have things to report, I noticed great things started happening to me, so I'd have something to tell people.
Okay.
But they started noticing I was paying attention to like these great things happening. I swear to you, one of my friends said to me, if you think that's great, wait till you hear what happened to me.
Okay.
Completely shifted.
Right.
So moon snail can help us grow the light. The world needs all the light it can get.
Yeah, no kidding. No
So if
kidding.
we start paying attention to the good things, the kid in the class who's well behaved, no one pays attention. It's the one acting up that gets the attention.
Yeah, yeah. No,
If
it's
we would
spot
start
on.
paying attention to the quiet one too, they wouldn't have to take the route of getting wounded.
Exactly. Well, that's such a great metaphor, such a great analysis of what's going on today in the world.
Yeah,
What we pay attention to versus what we should be paying attention to, right?
right. And we have the power. We can grow the light.
Exactly. Wow. Well, maybe we should make 2026 the year of the moon snail.
It's so funny because my students call it moon snailing. When they see someone blowing things up out of proportion to make it worse, they go,
Okay.
oh, that person is moon snailing.
Wow. That's great. That's
Made
great.
it into the
And
lexicon.
I love the fact that it goes both ways. You know what I mean? Because you're right. Like it is like typically it's used for like bad things, right? But if you flip it and you say, hey, you can actually use the same thing for something positive, right? Something, a powerful
Because the
force.
problem is not that you feel love through attention, it's how you get the attention.
Yeah. Yeah, no, spot on, spot on. Let me ask you, maybe I don't know, maybe it's a funny question or not a funny question, but if shells could actually really talk, like talk with words, right?
Right?
What do you think they would say about you, the work that you're doing for your clients? What would be their message to you?
I think that shells would want people to realize teachers don't always come in human bodies,
Mm,
so that we're all in it together. And it could be plants, it could be crystals, it could be flowers, it could be all kinds of things that are not in a human body, but have master teachings for us. The shells have been extremely patient, but they have guidance to help us navigate through life if we are just willing to listen to Mother Nature.
So do you think the equivalent that so basically you made your whole life about seashells, but do you think that there might be people in this world who are spending as much energy as you're spending with seashells on like leaves or trees or on plants or and they are kind of reading or gleaning the same information, the same powerful information from those objects as you're getting from seashells? Yes?
I do. In fact, think of how many people work with crystals.
Yes.
Okay. So they're working with crystals like quartz and citrine and fluorite. Those are crystals from the mineral kingdom
Hmm.
and the earth element.
Right.
Seashells are crystals. It's just they're from the animal kingdom and the water element. So all those people that are working with crystals, if they would connect the dots just one step and realize shells are crystals, they would instantly see the benefits for mind, body, and spirit.
Okay. Wow. Very cool. Very cool. So what's next for Ocean Oracle? I know that you're doing readings still. You have the courses. I could and we talked a little bit on email about like what might be next as well. But what's going around your mind in terms of how Ocean Oracle could evolve?
Well, because of the crystal part, I keep thinking if people realize seashells were crystals, so I'm almost done and I'm writing a new book
Okay.
and it's called Ocean Crystals.
Mm.
Oh, let me show you. I actually have the cover because the subtitle, Ocean Crystals. Oh, I don't know if it's coming out straight or not.
I can see that well. I can see that well. Yep.
So seashells,
I see.
SEA,
Yeah, clever. Okay.
are seashells.
You should be in marketing, Shelly.
So you see the eye in the sky.
Very good. Yep.
The pupil is a chamber nautilus because chamber nautilus is the shell of ascension. And I actually have here it is, a guided meditation where you walk in, you shrink and you walk into the chamber nautilus. Chamber nautilus grows in sacred geometry. So it's connecting you to your own sacred geometry, your divine perfection, so to speak. And so that's what I wanted. I wanted someone to be connecting with looking at the world through the eyes of sacred geometry, through
Okay.
the eyes of ascension, which will give you a whole different perspective. And that's why seashells are seashells. But that would include growing the light, those kinds of information as well. Oh my gosh. So can I tell you one more? There's so many magical things, but this is a cowrie shell.
Look
Cowrie shells,
like
if
an
anyone
egg.
has one, almost, yeah. I was going to say, if anyone has one
It
and you
looks like
feel
one
it,
of those Fabergé eggs for like, I don't know, 50,000. Yeah.
that's perfect because, okay, let me show you the back of it. That's the underside. So in ancient Rome, this to them looked like the vulva, the genital tract of their sows, their pigs.
Okay.
So they call the shell porcellana shell because that means little pig.
Okay.
Then Marco Polo comes with this glazed pottery, like the Fabergé egg you were just talking about, that glazed pottery. Reminded them so much of their porcellana shell, they called that pottery porcelain. If you
Oh,
look up porcelain in dictionary, it'll
okay.
start to talk about the vulva of a sow, and you're going to say, what does that have to do with porcelain?
Kidding.
It's because of the cowrie. So there's that. But the animal wraps itself around the outside of the shell. So because I showed you that tissue is so soft and tender, this has to stay smooth. No one has polished it. The animal does that for its own survival. Well, instead of just being connected to the pigs and the sows, this broadened to be connected to the womb and to the goddess. And in Japan, it's called koyasugai. That means peaceful child shell. Women in labor hold on to these, believing it's going to facilitate the birth process. So it's the shell of faith. Now, the story I want to tell you that is so magical is one of my students had a cherished nephew die in a very freakish snowstorm. And for comfort, she said to him, I need you to show me a sign that you're okay. And what she asked him for was a tiger cowrie. Now, I did not know this, but she lived close to me. And to comfort her, she had brought over a bowl of chicken soup because I had a cold and she was coming to pick up the pot. And I thought, I want to give her a cowrie because I just learned about her nephew. I had these huge cowries. I grabbed one and I handed it and I gave it to her. She went home. The next day she called me. She said, you're not going to believe this, but do you see all the dots on the shell?
Yep.
She was looking at her cowrie. The dots spelled out the name of her nephew.
Wow. Okay.
And I thought, she's grieving. She just wants to imagine that that's the case. I asked her to bring it back. I saw the name of her nephew fully across the shell. I saw the word home and I saw the word joy. So I did not know she had requested that he show her a tiger cowrie, but she ended up with one with his name on it.
That's insane.
It's insane. It really
Yeah.
is. And the other thing I wanted to tell you, talking about their intelligence and their compassion, I always want to mention this, is this shell. This is called a helmet conch.
Uh-huh.
They need to be like this to get around. This is a story of 3 helmet conchs. One was like this. The other 2 were 16 feet apart, like this. And the person telling this story is a biologist who was under the water to do his recordings. So he only tells this in hindsight. He saw the 3, but he ignored them because he had work to do. He ran out of film in his camera. He went back to his boat to get more film. It's now hours later, and the 2 who were like this had made their way closer to the one like this.
Uh,
Now, this one is a sitting duck because
uh-huh.
if you need to be like this to go get food, he can't go get food, and he's exposed to any predator.
Undisposed, yeah.
So completely in danger. The 2, coming from different angles, came over like little bulldozers. They dug out the sand to loosen him up. They came around behind, climbed up, turned him over, and saved him. These are supposed to be lowly invertebrates. They had to care someone was in trouble. First of all, that's the compassion. Then they had to work together to figure out a plan to save him, and they did. And when I read that, I wrote to the malacologist, the man who had taken the pictures, and I asked permission to use his pictures in a book so I could teach about the compassion, and he granted me permission. That's how I knew I had to write Ocean Wisdom, because he granted me permission. So here you see the top picture. You can see the one in trouble
Yep.
is over here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Here's the 2 coming over.
Yep.
Here's where they've loosened the sand. They're going to come around behind, turn him over, and save him.
Wow. Okay.
So that's what I mean. People are now realizing the octopus has intelligence. So do snails.
I mean, like so many of the stories that you tell, I'm thinking could become like, Disney stories, or could become just like motion picture movies, or could become like, amazing. You could make a whole retreat, I think, around this, or you could make a whole like amusement park around this, where people learn things, because that's the best way, I think, for people to learn is through like play and through like,
Yes.
entertainment and excitement. I mean, God knows, like that's how people learn today, right?
Right.
Videos and experiential, right? So I just feel like there's so much there that could be shared with the world in a way that would be very playful and very fun.
Thank you for saying that, because I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that I might be able to speak to someone about making a documentary. And that would be really helpful for more people to find out about how smart, how compassionate, and the master teachings. Because I know people don't associate shells with master teachings, but my gosh, I mean, the poisonous shell I was telling you about, that poison is a cocktail of proteins. And if you take out the poisonous part, science has found a way to make medicines 1,000 times more powerful than morphine at killing pain.
Wow.
And that are not addictive.
Okay.
So if we judge them as, oh, these are so deadly, and we got rid of them, we would have wiped out a pharmacy. So that's lessons about judgment, and that from a poison comes a medicine. So they flip our thoughts about things.
Shelly, I mean, I feel like the class that you were talking about, where 3 hours later and they're still like, they forgot it. And so I feel we could keep going and going and going, and still you would know more. I mean, you have such a wealth of information in your brain about shells, and such a passion to go along with it. It's really remarkable.
Thank you. The reason I'm so glad that I can teach online, I'll be honest with you. I used to teach and try to cram as much information as I could, And people would leave, and they actually came up with the term shell shock, which was information overload.
Right.
When I teach online, you can process each class at your own convenience. And
Right.
so that way, it's not overwhelming. And also, that way, when I get new information, I can keep updating. I couldn't keep writing books to update,
No, of
but
course.
I could update the classes.
Yeah.
So that's two benefits that I'm really grateful for.
Yeah, no, 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 I totally get that. Listen, is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't ask, or anything you want to share about anyone who's curious about exploring like seashells and, their meaning vis-a-vis their own life, their own inner life? Anything else you'd like to share?
I would say if this inspires anybody, if they have any questions at all, please don't hesitate. You can email me. That's Michelle@oceanoracle.com. And I think you covered everything that we could without me going down a whole nother avenue that would take way too long with the Shells' energy tools. But I think they have enough to process with what we talked about. I loved your questions. It was
I
fun
mean,
for me.
honestly, there's so much more that even above, and as you were talking about the shell that you were showing the shells and how they're empty inside. Whenever I see a shell, I do wonder there was a living organism inside that shell once. What exactly happened to it? What killed it? How did it vanish? So, just from a biological perspective, there's a lot more that I'd like to know. But then also from the more metaphysical or spiritual perspective as well. I mean, again, there's so much more you could share with us.
I would, you know what? There is one thing I would like to take the opportunity. So, cone shells, I was talking about them because people are in the ocean, they're picking up shells. Please admire from afar because you wouldn't think a snail could eat a fish, but that's what they have, these harpoon like teeth to paralyze their prey. That's why they have the poison.
Okay.
But fish are vertebrates and so are we. So you don't want to go anywhere near cones of any species. They all have the harpoon. Some only eat tube worms, so they're not as deadly. But as I said, you've got the cigarette snail where you won't last too long after that.
Yeah.
So I would like to take a moment just to encourage people to kind of admire from afar, but don't go near cones.
Hey, just one last question since we had a family reunion in Jamaica last week. So I was actually very close to shells last week, which is not my typical life. And so I did wonder, the shells here, would I find them all over the world in all the various oceans? Or are they, just like animals, very regional, where you find certain shells only in certain geographies, in certain like waters, but not in others? Or are they kind of like all over the place?
The answer to that question is yes and no. Some travel all over the world.
Okay.
Some are very local, and see, shells are supply and demand. If you don't know where to find that bed of shells, then they will be prohibitively expensive because you can't find many. But if the next day someone finds a bed of them, the value would go down and you can get more. But there are certain ones that when they're first born, they don't have a shell and they drift in the ocean. And if they don't find the coral that they need to land on, they won't build their shells. So there's all kinds of different scenarios going on depending on which ones we're talking about as to where they might be found.
Okay. But are there some, like Edelweiss is a very, very, very rare flower. You can only find Edelweiss first of all, in very high altitudes. And then usually it's not just high altitudes, but it's also very hard to get to places in those high altitudes. Are there seashells like that as well, where, they're super hard to get to?
Okay, so there's a slit shell that used to be very elusive because it wouldn't take bait. And this was found near Japan. Only the Emperor Hirohito, it was called the Emperor's shell for that reason. He was the only one allowed to have them. If you had one, it was a gift from the Emperor because they were hard to come by. There's another shell. Couldn't figure out quite where to find them, so they were expensive. But someone in China figured out how to make rice paste counterfeits. And they would look you in the eye and sell you the counterfeit for $1,000. And I read the practice stop because if you washed your shell, it was just rice paste, it would dissolve.
Right. Okay.
So there are different people that respond in different ways to these things. The green tree snail, I didn't even talk about this today, but the green tree snail is a land snail and it lives among the leaves in Papua New Guinea. That's the only place, Papua New Guinea. And there's times of the year where the climate is intolerable and they go into hibernation. You won't find them because they're hibernating. It's almost like a temporary hibernation until the climate changes and they come back out again. And this is a very powerful shell because it's all about change of comfort zone. Been there, done that, don't want to do it anymore, something's getting old. And this shell, when you ask me about shells in my life, I guess this has been a constant because it's always pushing me out of my comfort zone when it involves work. I was a shy person. It pushed me to the first radio interview. It pushed me to the TV show. It pushed me to teach seminars. It's always pushing me in a good way because it helps me be an ambassador for them. When it's in a reading, it's the perfect time for the person to be having a reading because it means they're changing, at least subconsciously, they're changing their comfort zone around something.
Wow. Shelly, thank you so much. Honestly, you have taught us so much about land shells and snail shells. And what was the first one you talked about? The religious one, the episcopal one?
The Episcopal miter, that's one species. There's actually a pontifical miter too.
There you go. There you go. So, I mean, and then there's the other 497 we didn't get to, but you told me so much about that, and again, the meeting and your practice and the courses and sessions and all of that. And I just want to thank you very much. And I would encourage anyone who is still with us and enjoyed this podcast to explore Shelly's offerings on Plentiful. I will include the link below, so you can simply click on the link, go over to her store, and then see her offerings there. And yeah, so thanks very much, Shelly, and to
Thank
everybody
you.
else, thank you very much for listening and for being part of this as well.
Seashell blessings to everybody.
There you go. Okay. Bye bye. Thank you.
Thank you.